Have you ever heard this song by Johnny Paycheck? Take that job and shove it, I ain't working here no more. Well, that pretty much sums up the topic of today's video. Today I'm going to talk about 5 signs you may recognize that means it may be time to quit your trucking job and move on to somebody else. Sign number 1, your paychecks are consistently wrong and they're consistently lower than what they should be. They're never higher. They never make a mistake in that direction. They're always too low. They've always skipped miles. They've always missed picks or drops that should be paid. There's always something. Now, this can happen in a big carrier, and you've got to be fairly patient with them, but you've got to figure out a way to determine how to correct the situation. Now, you've got to be fairly patient with your carrier about this. You've got to figure out where the problem lies. So you've got to start with going to your dispatcher and saying, hey, it's farther from here to there than that, or you missed this drop or pick or whatever it is, and you've got to be able to work with the carrier. You've got to be patient. You've got to give them a chance to correct it, but you need them to correct the mistake before the next paycheck comes out, and that's a given. They can't let it lapse and let it lapse. You need that money. You've earned that money. You deserve to be paid that money. Now, if this happens consistently, and it's a big problem with a lot of carriers, because what they'll do is short your miles. It's a favorite trick of theirs. You've got to be on top of this stuff. You should be keeping a book and track your odometer readings from point to point. A lot of the ELDs now will show the trip distance that you're being paid. Keep track of that as well. Keep track of everything you can in this little book so you can match it against your pay statement, and you've got to do this. But if it becomes a problem where every paycheck is wrong, you've got to go above the dispatcher's head, because you've got to say, hey, something bigger is going on here. I got to find out what it is. So you go to payroll or you go to the operations manager, and again, be patient, explain the problem, say, I've got a history of this. Be able to back up what you're saying. Show them your pay statements. Short 300 miles here, short 200 miles here. Be able to back up what you're saying and say, this has got to stop. You've got to fix this problem because this isn't working for me. This is my money. I've earned it. However, some carriers deliberately lowball their drivers. And you'll be able to tell after a period of 6 months or so if the same pattern's still going on, if the same problems are still happening, you got to be ready to bail. So line up another job, line up another carrier or whatever you're going to do, and give your notice and tell them why. Tell them why you're giving your notice, because they just can't get your pay statements right, and your bills rely on your pay statements. But if you've got a carrier that consistently gets your paycheck wrong and it's consistently low, it's time to get out of there. The second sign that it may be time to go is they consistently disrespect your requests for home time. Now, for over-the-road drivers, home time is a major deal. Guys are gone 6, 7, 8 weeks at a time, so when they do request home time, it's important that the carrier respect that. You don't know, the dispatch doesn't know why you need that home time, but it really shouldn't matter. You've requested it, you've earned it. It could be because you haven't seen your kids in a while. It could be because you've got a medical appointment, you've got a legal appointment. A lot of guys need to be home because they get their kids every other weekend after a divorce. It really doesn't matter what the situation is. If it's important to the driver, important enough that he's got to mention it to the carrier needs to realize that that's a big deal to that driver. It's important to get that guy home. And if you've got a carrier that just throws that right out the window and just has no respect for your request for home time at all, it's time to go, because this is your life. It's important to you. Your job isn't the only part of your life that's important to you. Your family, your home time, it's also very important to you. And if the carrier doesn't give a whiff about that, then you shouldn't be giving a whiff about them. You're working with the wrong guys. It's time to line something else up and go and tell them why. Sign number 3 that it may be time to go, and I've talked about this lots. It's one of my favorite beefs, junk equipment. Now, some carriers will start out well, and then they just start to neglect their maintenance programs, or they start failing to replace their equipment when it's due time, and you'll notice these trends. And this is a bad trend to see, because often what it indicates is the carrier is starting to run out of money. And one of the first things they neglect is their maintenance on the equipment. Now, maintenance issues are a big deal because not only are you suffering the downtime from the breakdowns, and you're not getting paid for the breakdowns, you can get hits against your license when you get pulled into the scale and they find something wrong. And that's a big deal because you need your license to make your job, to make your paycheck, to pay your bills. It can mean bigger things too. It can mean wheels off and people hurt or killed. It can mean all sorts of nasty legal issues. It's just something you don't even want to get involved in at all. They own the equipment. It is their legal responsibility to keep that equipment in mint tip-top shape. And if you notice signs that this is starting to go out the window, if you say, hey, I've got a problem I want to fix before I go out, and they're just blowing you off, that's a sign to go. You've got to take your license seriously. You've got to take your life seriously. You've got to take the lives of other people seriously on the interstate. If they're not taking their care of their equipment, it may be time to go. The fourth sign that it may be time to go is you just can't get past the dispatcher. And this is becoming a problem in all sorts of carriers. And what happened a number of years ago was that the carriers figured out that a way to pacify these dispatchers, and some of them aren't the sharpest tools in the sheds, well, they give them a title, and they started calling them driver managers instead of giving them a raise. So they got a title instead of a raise, and a bunch of them went, oh, I'm important now, I've got a title. And some of these guys, a lot of these guys, it went to their heads, and they started thinking they were some sort of boss or manager. So they'd carry on that way. They'd treat their drivers like crap and not do a very good job of taking care of the drivers. So what would happen in a situation like this is you'd get a dispatcher that had no clue what he was doing. You wouldn't be making any money, or there'd be some other problem with him. And you've got to go to the point where you've got to get above this guy's head. You've got to go over top this guy, get to an operations guy or whatever and say, I got a problem with this dispatcher. I'm not making any money. He disrespects me constantly, and this just isn't working for me. But dispatchers or driver managers will know that this is becoming an issue, so they will block a driver's access to upper management because they don't want you running upstairs complaining about what a crap job they're doing. They want to keep it all on the hush-hush, on the low-low. So they will block all your efforts as a driver to get upstairs and say, hey, it's not working for me. If you get a dispatcher like that, dispatchers can make you or break you. And there are good ones out there, don't get me wrong. But if you get a bad one, you've got to be able to get around them. And if you just can't get around them, no matter what you try, after sending emails to the upper management or phone calls or letters or whatever you need to do, try your best, be patient, try to get around this guy because he's a fool. But if nothing's working, it's time to go because the number of miles you get is your income, basically. You need that money, you deserve to make that money, you deserve to maximize your hours of service, and if this guy's messing you up, it's not working for you, it may be time to go. Now, number 5 on the list is the overall feeling that you get from the carrier that you're with. You spend years and years and years working, spending your life working, 40, 50 years sometimes, depending on who you are. And it's important that if you're going to spend this many years at your career, it's important to be with a carrier that you're happy with, that you like, that respects you, that treats you well. If you're not getting warm fuzzies from your carrier, if they're not on a name-to-name basis with you, if they treat you poorly, they don't care when you have a request or some concern that you voice, and that just goes right out the window, they just don't listen to you. You've got to be aware of these things, and you'll have that feeling in your gut, whether you're at a good carrier or a bad carrier. And, you know, it's a long time to work when you're spending your whole career at something like that. It's important that you be happy. Trucking is a great career with the right carrier, and it's important that you find that because it'll make going to work easy every day instead of seeming like a chore when you're going to work and you just hate it. You hate leaving the house. That's a sign that you're with the wrong carrier. This is something to pay attention to because if not, it kind of builds up inside and builds up inside, and every once in a while then you'll just blow because you get so mad and you get so frustrated and you'll go postal. You don't want to end up like that. You don't need to do that. You're just with the wrong carrier. And if you feel this coming on, it's a good indication that it may be time to go. Now, Kathy's going to help me read some of these comments because we got so many of them, we were just overwhelmed. So here's the first one from Carrie Churchill. Being given a broken down piece of junk and told it's DOT compliant when you're pointing out obvious defects. Then being told, oh, don't worry about that. The DOT won't bother you about that. The hell they won't. Good comment.
Northern Norm 65. My brother is in intensive care in a coma, and this F-stain in dispatch tells me to hang tight. He's going to try to find something going that way. Wrong answer. The correct answer is family first. You go now. Wasn't long after that, I was working somewhere else.
Right on. The next one is from Ryan, who says, I left my last driving job because they tried to force me into running overweight. When I told them I wasn't going to run illegal, they threatened to fire me and talked to me like I was a child. So I quit.
C. Birch comments, the last company I worked at was a night shift line haul job, 6 p.m. to 4 a.m. There was bad weather one night and my trip ended up being dragged out till 7 a.m. When I got back home to the terminal, I wanted to go home because at that point I was too tired to work anymore. The manager tells me that I had to go out and move trailers around in the yard. I told him I was tired. He got out a policy sheet and threatened to write me up. I told him off, didn't move anything, came in the next morning, and I resigned. So I guess if anyone were to tell me to work tired, that's an automatic deal breaker for me.
Absolutely. The next comment is from Carlos, who says, going to a place that gets really cold and they know the heater doesn't work in the truck and they still send the driver.
Man, that's just abusive.
Yep, that is driver abuse.
And James S. comments, so I'm slated to get married this Saturday, February the 22nd. Now that's this Saturday. I requested Friday and Saturday off for it. Then I will take another trip, and then a week off for a honeymoon. Well, right now I'm expected to get back Thursday night. However, the last few weeks, Wyoming has been closing down for days at a time, so there is a real possibility that I might not even make it to my own wedding. All because dispatch needs to squeeze every last mile they can out of me. Small company. I enjoy the tight-knit aspect of the company, but when I got important stuff like this, I don't want to be pushing the limit on getting home in time. That's my deal breaker.
Imagine missing your wedding for the sake of a load.
Let us know if you make it to the church on time,
That's
James
crazy.
S.
That's crazy. Finally, from Ghost Rider, and this is a big one with a lot of guys. Driver-facing cameras and random coaching from a safety guy who never even had a CDL.
Ooh.
At the end of the day on this, I want to be clear with you guys. Switching carriers is a big deal. It's not a decision to be taken lightly. So bear this in mind. Give your carrier every opportunity to correct the situation, but it's important that they do. And if you've just got to do it, it's in your best interest alone. So at that point, tell the carrier you're going to move, but I recommend telling them every time why. Show them that you've given them every chance. They're not reacting, they're not cooperating. It's not something you're willing to tolerate. And that's why you've got to go and be clear with them on this. It's the professional thing to do in a situation like this. Take care, keep the rubber side down. And speaking of keeping the rubber side down, a bunch of you guys have been honest about t-shirts, so we got off our butts and we've produced some. I've got one on here today. If you're interested, do some shopping. They're posted below. We're pulling for you here at Smart Trucking. I'll see you on the back home.